Welcome back to Freedom to Learn podcast. My name is Guru Yeleshwarapu, CEO of Silicon Valley for You. And for those who are new to this podcast, subscribe it and press on the like button. Today we have very special guest, Giri Gondi. He's my classmate for 4 years. And then,
a long time ago.
Yep. Now, yeah, so we crossed paths, in fact, right after our college. We'll talk about that later. But subsequently, now he's the entrepreneur and he's the CEO of Tecra Systems based out of Austin. And so we'll be talking to him about his journey from India to US and beyond, and a bunch of things he did in US. So anyways, welcome, Giri.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Just appreciate the introduction. So obviously, I look forward to this podcast. Obviously, I haven't done it before, so I guess this is the first time that I'm involved with this. So we'll see where it goes. I'm very excited to be, on this.
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, the idea of this podcast is, as you know very well, so it's called Freedom to Learn, to give a message to youth and more importantly to their parents too, saying that, hey, there are certain things that happen for a reason. And, like based on your experience, if you can share, hopefully they can take advantage of those. So with that, so why don't you just tell viewers about yourself and how your life started in India, what got you to US, and all that.
Yeah, sure. I can definitely do that. I don't know how much that I can add value for all these guys, but I hope that there's something that I have done in my past that can be helpful to some of the others, especially people who are trying to get into some of the entrepreneurship kind of things. I'll be more than willing and happy to share today with some of my experiences. It doesn't mean that it will work for everybody, but it is what it is. So whatever you can take from it, go ahead and do that. Just to give you a little bit of background, so I was born in India, Vijayawada to be precise, in Andhra Pradesh. I pretty much did my entire schooling there, right from my kindergarten to the high school and even engineering in Vijayawada. So I wasn't going anywhere outside of Vijayawada for any of my education per se. And then all of a sudden, once we finished our BTech in electrical engineering, obviously that's where you and I were classmates there, and we had at least a couple of years because we were sharing the same classes for both computer science and electrical engineering at that time. So that was fun. So after that, once we finished BTech, I always was interested in computer science, even though I was doing like a double A degree. Computers always fascinated me. While in college, I took some courses outside, like basic and some programming courses, I should say, things like that, like two or three courses outside, and then we got really fascinated with basic. I was doing a lot of writing some small games and stuff, and playing with the sounds and so forth. It was just starting in Vijayawada, all these institutes, I should say, just coming up, and I got into those and learned some of those things. And as soon as I was done with the college. I got a job at a company called Electronics. I think you're familiar with that. So they're primarily into some of the hardware stuff. They used to do a lot of display boards, electronic display boards. They were actually a pioneer in that space. They were one of the first ones in India, to come up with the whole technology for display boards. And they used to have it primarily in the, I should say, railway stations and maybe even some airports and such on as well. So I got involved with them, and I was doing some programming, programming all those lights and stuff like that, LEDs and things in Pascal. And, I did that for a couple of months or so. And then one of my managers came to me and said, hey, you know what? We're actually building this new ERP system. At that time, it wasn't called ERP, but, essentially it was an ERP system. And we looked at some programmers, I know you're interested in doing some of the programming outside of Pascal, you want to get in? It's like, yep, I got in. And that's when I worked on one of their inventory modules at that time. Primarily using technology like DBase4. And, later, I think we migrated to Fox. And he's like, really old, you're dating ourselves, right? I know you're laughing. But really, really old stuff. But anyway, to make it a long story short, so I started off there, and then I realized that maybe I should just do something advanced in that space. So I decided to move to the US to pursue my master's here. Since I got a nice introduction to computer science, and we did those projects on the programming side, so I thought maybe I'll just get into computer science. So that's how I got into computer science here. So luckily, since I had all this work experience, I didn't have to go through a lot of prereqs. I only got like, one prereq or something on the data structure. That's all I did. So I got lucky. So I did my master's here. And at that time, my wife, would-be wife, was studying, going to school in Michigan. And a lot of my friends were there as well. So I just said, okay, that's the time to go. So once I'm done with my degree, I moved to Detroit. And remember, this is like in the early 90s, where Detroit just coming out of, not in Detroit, just the entire US is coming out of a pretty bad recession. And they're just about to take off. So we got pretty lucky there. So we go there, and if you could spell Oracle, you got a job. I mean, even if you say ORLC, you're like, okay,
come on in.
you got a job. Exactly.
Yeah.
So those are crazy times, right? So luckily, I knew Oracle because I did a little bit of it in India, and then after that, just learned it on my own, I guess. So we got in, and after that, I started working for U companies, consulting. They worked with a couple of tier 2 suppliers, and then worked with the Detroit Edison, the utility company over there. And then finally ended up a couple of years later with a company called MSX International. It's a subsidiary of Ford Motor Company. And we ended up building the first ever vendor management system out there in the world. It wasn't even called vendor management system at that point, because Ford had about 4,000 to 6,000 contractors, depending on when. So they wanted to have a process, a system to manage the whole thing, everything from interviews to, placements, the requisitions, timesheets, the whole 9 yards. So the four of us just built that, entire system. So it was very successful. At that time, the CEO came to us and said he read a book where he's saying everything needs to be built in 90 days. So he gave us 90 days to build the first iteration of the software. And obviously, we were working, really, really hard. And we did launch it and all, and then it was a nice system that we built, very successful. Some of the pieces of that are still being used, after 20 years. So it's a little crazy. So that's how I ended up with MSX, and worked there for 5 or 6 years. I was managing all their databases, Oracle database. I was like this, Oracle. DBS, I had a few people reporting me, and we managed database all across the world in different continents, in Europe and South America, Australia, all that stuff. At that point, late 90s, that's when the entrepreneurship bug hit me, and they said, okay, it's time for me to go on my own and start something. So that was my journey from India to US.
US.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, I remember I used to be a support engineer for electronics. I used to come there. That's when I met you.
Yeah, sure.
So,
afterwards,
yeah. So whenever these Unix machines just die, and then we used to get a call, and I used to come there. So
we used to run something called Unified Database.
Unified Database. I was the Unified guy. Yeah. So because I did my college project in Unified, that's why they used to call me a Unified expert or whatever that means. So we didn't know much, but anyway, so that was fun days. Those were fun days, to be honest. DBS, Ford, Fox Pro, oh, Jesus. So
exactly.
One thing I always admire about you is that you read a lot. You're an avid reader. So I that's something people had to learn to do it. So see, back in our time, right, I call it, I jokingly, pre-internet times, right? We came to US.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So, and there was no Google, nothing. So for us to turn into an entrepreneur, so yeah, the whatever you did, right? You had to work here, work there, learn few things, and figure out what you want to build, and then eventually start something, right? So nowadays things change quite a bit, right? Everything is at people's disposal through internet and all kinds of means. There's a lot of information. In other words, if somebody wants to be an entrepreneur, they do not have, I think they do not have to spend so much time. It also depends. And even in Bangalore. So other thing is that, for instance, people who are in India, back then there were 5 companies. Now crazy, 5 companies are in one street, not even more than that. So tons of companies. There are a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of atmosphere all over the world. And so my question to you is, what's your advice, for somebody, who has thoughts of being entrepreneur, sitting in college right now, wondering what to do, how to do, and based on your experience, and, maybe you can state the, top 3 things that should just start implementing right now so that one day they can launch their own journey of being entrepreneur.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, I love entrepreneurship, right? I mean, I've been involved with several companies. I'm a serial entrepreneur, so we got some, started to do a lot of companies, and did some exits and shut some down. So it's all part of the game, right?
Right.
But the thing is I don't think entrepreneurship is for everybody. I think entrepreneurship is hard. And it definitely is not for everybody. It's not saying that, okay, entrepreneurship is so great that, if you're an entrepreneur or something. No, it's not that. It's just that it takes a different kind of mindset. It's not that, if you're not an entrepreneur, you're not, smart, or if you're an entrepreneur, you're really, really smart. It's not that. It's just a lot of things involved, in becoming an entrepreneur. And, you have to be a lot, you need to have a lot of self-motivation for that, right? Because you're pretty much up there, all by yourself. You need to make decisions. You don't know what's going to happen in the future. I mean, and based on certain facts, which you think at the time there are facts, you make some decisions and all. And then, but you have to live with it, down the road. It's not like a job. If you don't like it, you just, go on to something. I mean, there are people dependent on you, especially once you start a company, once you have people involved. It is that much more difficult. But I mean, it's a great journey, though. I mean, if you really like it, if that's what you want to do, I mean, it is really, really awesome, right? You get a lot out of it, a lot of satisfaction, in terms of what it is, and especially if you get into some of these products and services that definitely, when the customer comes to you and says, you know what, wow, this is really good. I really liked what you're doing, and how come I haven't talked to you or seen your product before? That gives you really a huge high, right? So that's what you're going after. I mean, it's not about just the money and all. Yeah, money comes. I mean, there are several ways of making money. You don't have to be an entrepreneur, to make it really big. Nowadays there's a lot of other ways to do it. But it's just satisfaction of starting something from scratch, coming up with an idea, building on top of that, having a team, putting those things together, and then taking it in front of the customer and having somebody pay you for that stuff. I think that's the ultimate kick, at least from my perspective. That's what I have. So, I mean, just from what are the 3 things you asked for? 3 things, right? I mean, I don't know if I can put it in 3 things, but I can definitely say some of the things that I really, really focus on. Is first one, I would say, would be the persistence. One thing I noticed is, people who are persistent and just doing same things over and over again, just trying to do the same thing day in, day out, they will be successful in the long run. I mean, everybody goes through ups and downs. There are like a couple of occasions where I was like, okay, I was so frustrated. I was like, okay, I'm going to shut down Tecra or whatever. But then next day you wake up and it's a new day, and then all of a sudden something happens and you get a big high out of that stuff. So persistence is definitely something that I think people should be aware of, and then they should definitely focus on that stuff, because people come back. You might have talked to someone, introduced your product or your service, at some conference or in some meeting or whatever. They remember that sometimes, and they'll come back. I'm surprised that I get calls from people that I've talked to like 3, 4, 5, even 10 years ago. They called me and said, "Hey, such and such date. I mean, we had this conversation, and you showed me something which I really liked, but now I'm with a new company. We need something similar to that." So that's those are the kind of things you will get once you have, once you show that persistence and just the survival, the fact that you survive all those years as a company and then keep thriving, that means a lot. So people just do not, I think, give up if it sees some couple of bad days or whatever, and just start focusing on that. Sometimes what happens is, over the period of time, the customers will guide you. They'll say, yeah, I like this, but you know what? Can you add this? Can you add that? So that's how you progress, to the next level. And then, nowadays you see a lot of people moving around, right? So let's say if you do a good job with one company and they work with those people and all, they move to a different entity or a different company, or maybe they start their own thing, and then they'll remember that. If you do a good job, they'll remember that and they'll come back to you. So that is like, easy sale, because you don't have to really sell to them at that point. You already sold them whenever it was in his past company, and you delivered on your promise. And now once they go to the new company, they're like, okay, come on in. So that's like, you don't have to spend any money on sales. So it's like a word of mouth kind of thing. So over the long run, we do get like 20-25% of our business just through those kind of word of mouth referrals, for nothing actually, just by doing a good job in their past endeavors or wherever they were. You can get those kind of businesses, right? So that would be, I think, the persistence definitely is at the top of the list. The other one would be, your attitude, your customer focus. I would say that is one of the main things, especially in this industry. You need to be always customer focused, and that's what we try to be. I mean, interestingly enough, we do a survey every year, for our customers and some of the prospects as well, saying, hey, this year, what do we do right? What are your suggestions? Everything. Customer service always comes at the top, because the first thing we train our people whenever they come in is like, forget about what doing this or that for today, or fixing this bug and stuff. The customer calls, you pick up the call. The customer sends you an email, you respond back immediately, right? No matter what it is, because we have, even though we don't support 24/7, we do have some customers that we support like 80-20 hours. Because we have offices in India and also our team in Romania. Sometimes we support it in addition to our teams here in the US. But most of the time, they'll pick up the phone no matter what it is, and that adds a lot of value, because the customer is just calling you in desperation, and if you just say, hey, acknowledge that, and then help them out, whatever it is, they'll remember that. They'll remember that in the long run. So the customer focus will be is a good thing, and as part of the customer focus also, since we come from a development background, and most of the people that work with us, since we are on the technology side, they come from a developer mindset. I mean, for them, it's more like, okay, if this thing works, then it's good enough, and then move on. But they don't think that is not from a technical perspective. The customer do not care how good you have been. We have written the code in like 4 lines or 5,000 lines. They don't care as long as they see that stuff, on their website or wherever it is on the application. So that's what really matters to them. So we can calculate this thing with our colleagues, basically saying that you have to look at it from a customer perspective. So that's where the customer centricity comes into things. So I would advise that if you're doing this, no matter what it is that you're building. So obviously, if you're building a thing, you have to have a nice product to build to, or you're coming up with a service that needs to make sense for customers, and so that people are willing to pay you money for that. But after that, I think those are the two things, the main things: persistence and consistency. And then the customer focus would be my two main things. The next one would be choosing the right team. I think the team is really, really important. Even though you're like a small business, you still need a team of people, whether it's in choosing your partners, or choosing your employees, or your external partners as well. Those things are very important. We've been quite lucky with the companies that I work with, that we have people who are with us for really, really long term. We have some of our colleagues have been with us for almost 15-20 years. That's pretty much unheard of in the tech industry. Right? So they worked with us in India, then they came over here, and then they stuck with us even after they're getting their green cards and citizenships and all that stuff. So we're very, very grateful. But I mean, there's a reason for that, right? If you treat them well, if you take care of them well, and if you give them the right stuff, and then the right freedom to do what they need to do, they will stick with you. And because obviously we can't afford to pay as much as what a Google or a Microsoft can pay. I mean, they know that too. But we will provide all the intangibles, That's what makes these guys stick with us, and then we are very grateful. So those are the top three ones that I would
Yeah,
suggest to would-be entrepreneurs, which might be
those
helpful
are
in.
fantastic points. Actually, all three. I mean, just so you know, I mean, I'm talking about a very young guy who is trying to get into the world. I always say that the points you made is you are absolutely right. I have this brilliant idea. Great. And or even if you want to do a job, it doesn't matter whether you want to be on. You need to understand how to solve a problem. In other words,
Correct.
the guy has to use your services. Otherwise, you don't have paycheck. Period.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
So
because you might build the greatest product out there, right? If
doesn't
nobody is willing
matter.
to pay a penny for that, what's the
If
point? That's
nobody
why
is
people,
using it, then you're
exactly.
obsolete, basically. And
Yeah.
so that's the thing. Other thing I always say is that you interview people, you see that I see every day. So I see all these like 6 programming languages, all that. And then I asked a simple question: can you explain how coffee business works? Probably
Yep.
they just don't know. I mean, I say, okay, build a software for coffee business. Just take a shot at it, and they just can't.
Yeah.
So now, so point I'm trying to make is that that's the mindset. Other thing you said is that mindset you need to have to
The attitude, mindset.
attitude. That's the attitude. So you keep training. One day you become that, and then
Yep.
so once you do, then you're on the right track, and that's the other persistence, 100%. You are absolutely right. To keep persisting, so that, as you said, like sometimes you get into a meeting. I always, many times I get into a meeting, I get out, I'm like, okay, this is pretty useless. So and then after 6 months, something directly or indirectly, some kind of a reference comes through that, and then that leads to somewhere else.
Exactly.
Best example I had was, it's really funny. Basically, we were sending emails to this company to build some DevOps stuff, and they never replied. And then I was sitting in the conference, and then I saw a guy walking by with a badge, same company. I just followed that guy and said, "Hey, we kept sending emails. You guys never responding. I mean, I don't know if you are seeing our emails." This guy happened to be CTO, and he just talked to me for 5 minutes, and then I explained, "Can you come on Monday? Let's talk." And then I go to Monday, CMO, CTO, all the bunch of the board members, they're all waiting in the conference room. So we had much bigger than just that tool that we had. I mean, they were talking about. So those are the things, as you said, they just sort of happen, and you had to start somewhere. And so the other thing that I mentioned is that, so these guys have, when you finish your degree or whatever, when you are young, 21, 22, you are highly energetic. You have this attitude that I'm going to conquer the world. You are fresh and everything. If they can leverage that time to learn these, and then they get into something, if they want to, get into entrepreneurship, that's better than waiting until you're like 50 and then you have no interest in the world. So
no, actually, that's a good point. Actually, I wanted to talk about that as well, because it's funny. I would always suggest for the entrepreneurs to start very young. I mean, I don't recommend just coming right out of a college and becoming an entrepreneur, but I think it's much easier, like you said, to start companies when you're young. I mean, to be honest, if it was now, I would not have started a single company. Because like I say, right, we were in our late 20s and we're like, young and stupid. Nowadays we're just old and stupid, but that's a different thing.
stupid guy
So at
remains
that
safe.
time,
Yeah.
exactly, right? At that time, it was like, you have the spirit, you have the, you have the time. And then you feel like, what, if this doesn't work out, it's okay. At that time, my wife was working. I mean, she's getting a good salary. Worst case, I'll depend on her for some time, and then, I'll just go find another job, right? It's different. Then we didn't have any kids, no house payments or whatever.
Right.
But now, once you get into, this, and once you're like in your 30s, 40s, and 50s or whatever, I mean, it's not that you can't, you still can, but I mean, it just makes it much more easier to do it at that level. Because sometimes I would strongly believe in like ignorance is bliss. At that time, we didn't know, right?
Yeah.
You saw a couple of people doing it and being successful, like, if they can do it, why not? I mean, we can do it as well, right? And then trying to, at that point, once you get in, then you'll figure it out. Because we always wanted to be a product company, but it's very difficult to raise a product company. I mean, so to be a product company and do all that stuff. especially you were in Silicon Valley for the most part, but I was living in Detroit, right? So it's a funny story. I talked to some people, a few years back when we were in Detroit, and that's where I started Tecra. After I got out of college, I went there and started there. So they're like, we do software and then we have a product. Like, what? They do products, technical products in Detroit? Are you kidding me? It's like they don't even care. They don't even
Only
value
cost.
anything. Yeah. So yeah, but then that's what it is. So it's better to just start young,
Yeah.
as young as possible. But you don't want to be like a novice, right? Just out of college, because then you don't even know how business works. What's there. So I would suggest just work a few years in the industry, just figure out what it is,
Yeah.
and then start off. So that's what we did. So once I worked there for 5-6 years, they came out, and then we knew that the easiest way to do this is doing some staffing, and then got into that, and then we got into application development, and then I acquired a company in India. They just had a few dozen people at that point. And then after that, we started building products, right? So that's what our ultimate goal was. But to get to that, there wasn't this concept of raising money and everything like that, and like they do in Valley at that point. So this is how we just bootstrapped everything, from that perspective. So given a choice, if I would have been in Valley, I would have done it definitely a little different. But here being in Detroit, that was the easier way for us to do. Not easier, I should say, that was the easier way to start. And then once you got on it, and, you do whatever you need to do. So yeah, that's definitely a good point. Start whenever you're young. I think that makes it much easier.
You have this nothing to lose attitude, right? That's the attitude to have, so that you just swing it and just so. And also, even if you fail, make mistake, hopefully you're learning from it, and then it gets you to the next level. So I always say that, right? You're better off doing something for a year or two and failing than just, with all due respect, working for IBM or something, doing some silly stuff, and with all due respect again, you're always definitely better off, because your drive and everything will be way different from somebody who just casually doing something.
That's actually, you do learn from some of those mistakes, right? Because when we were doing that development, like I was talking about at MSX, the first vendor management system, the big problem was we're treating that just as like an application development. We didn't realize the difference between application development and building a true product. So even though these guys had the lead, there are all these startups who came like 5-6 years afterwards and basically beat them, to the pulp, just because they knew how to build a product. Because these guys are just so focused only on Ford, they didn't realize how to do it outside. But the other guys came in and said, you know what? We'll build something that can be used by by everybody, not just the automotive, in the healthcare sector, in finance, everywhere. And they became really, really successful. Some of them became billion-dollar companies. So yeah, you do learn those things, and then that's how we knew that these things, you start here, you know what not to do and how to build things too.
What not to do.
So that's exactly, because that's the key, right? Anybody, because it takes a lot of time and effort for it to just go do it and fail. And then if you don't learn from it, what's the point? You have to learn from it.
No, you're absolutely right. See, that's the nice segue into my next thing, right? So there are a lot of buzzwords out there which schools don't teach, which is the fact that we call it common sense, connecting the dots, leadership. Entrepreneurship is another word you just thrown out there. Basically, you got to be a leader to do this. I don't think people, especially younger people from certain regions, really understand what that means. Leadership means they think that I have to be at the top of the pyramid and everybody's going to report to me, and that's sometimes people think that's leadership. Long story short, what I typically preach to people is that for all these things, if you want to develop, for instance, if you take common sense, right, there is no subject called common sense, and there is curriculum and all that. So in order to learn those things, you learn only by doing it. You can't just, you must read and learn few things and tools and techniques and whatnot, but at the end of the day, if you want to develop those skills, you can develop only by doing them, not just watching or just going through a few boot camps. There are leadership boot camps and entrepreneurship boot camps. I have attended a bunch of them, some of them, not a bunch of them, but I haven't seen anybody become a leader out of those. So long story short, what's your take on that? These things can be learned by doing it. There is no other substitute.
I mean, you're right. The boot camps and stuff, I mean, they'll help, right? I mean, they definitely help. It's not like, it's doing any detrimental to it. But at the end of the day, that's not how it is done. It's like we have to practice, right? You can read all the books, out there on entrepreneurship and this and that, but that doesn't mean that, you'll be successful at it, right? You have to start implementing those things and learning from that. But there are several things, right? If you're just starting to plan to run a company, I mean, you need to know the financials of how to manage the financials, how to read balance sheets and, P&Ls and things like that. So those kind of things you need to learn anyway. So that's something that, you can't, I mean, you can pick it up, but it's better if you have some knowledge of it. That'll be helpful. But I mean, that is on the leadership side. So maybe I'll get to that first. I mean, being a leader is totally different than what some people might pursue, because everybody who talks to an entrepreneur is like, why do you want to do this? Everybody's like, oh, I want to be my own boss. I'm like, yeah, that sounds cool. But once you get in, and now previously you only have one boss when you're
working. Oh, you have thousands of them.
Now you had every customer is a boss of yours. And on top of that, as you know, given today's market, every
you work for all of them.
Is a boss of yours as well.
Yeah.
Right? So I don't believe in this concept of being your own boss and I can make my own decision. Given a chance, I would rather not make
not to do all that.
Because sometimes, we obviously we are making a ton of decisions every day. You're successful at some, and a lot of things that you don't get it right, but that's okay. But at least you have the capacity to do that. So just don't believe in hype that you are your own boss so that I can do whatever the crap I want to do. No, you'll be a lot more restricted once you become an entrepreneur, right? If you just have a job, it's a lot more easier. So you just do that job until you're done with it. I mean, you're not thinking in the back of mind, hey, I need to meet payroll tomorrow. I haven't got paid, whatever from these customers or whatever. How do I handle that? So you have a lot of things like that in the back of your mind. So yeah, I mean, it's not it's not an easy gig, but I mean, like I said, it's very, very fulfilling, right? From a leadership perspective, I think it's I mean, there are different kinds of leaderships, that I should say. I don't think there is like a panacea of one thing works for everything. Everybody. People have their own ways of leadership. I mean, people look at like Elon Musk and say, "Wow, man, he's a great leader." But if you talk to people working under him, I mean, it's hell for them, right? So how do you determine that? I mean, some people do it in a consensus manner, some do from a top-down perspective. So honestly, I don't know which one is right. I mean, from my perspective, the way I deal with it, that's all I can tell people, is basically I take mostly the consensus from most of the people. So I get the feedback, both the positives and negatives, and some decisions that we have to make. And then at the end of the day, it's on me to make that call, right? Because that's my job. To make sure that I make those kind of calls, and you live with it, whether it's a success or a failure, you live with it. But you give your ear to all kinds of opinions. Some people might have very biased opinions. Some people may be on the other side of you, but at the end of the day, you need to listen and just do what's right for the company, right? So that's the way I look at it from a leadership perspective.
Yeah, I agree.
And I mean, is it people born with leadership, or you have this nature versus nurture kind of debate? Honestly, I don't know. I think leadership can be learned. It's not like you have to be born with it. I mean, there are certain people who just those instincts come naturally. But there are other people, they just cultivate over a period of time. I might fall under the latter, category. So that I can't really say it's just, you have to be born with it all the time. But it is what it is for each on an individual basis. And so whatever works for you, as long as people working for you and working with you are happy, and you're running something successful, then I think that's what works.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the 2 points, two takeaways from what you're saying is I also believe that some people are born with it. So we are not talking about them. If you're born with it, as you said, instinct kicks in and you'll follow that, and then it just somehow it works out. We are talking about folks that are not in that category, right? Second thing is all these buzzwords I put it out there. There is no formula. There is no curriculum. That's what
exactly.
There is no formula. So that's why if you
otherwise everybody would be starting companies and they'll all be successful, right?
Common sense, common sense one, common sense two. So I guess to personalize, as you said, you got to do it, and then while you're doing it, you take certain things. Maybe you can read some books and follow certain individuals and whatnot, and then you personalize it, and then you turn that into your formula, so to speak, to be that. And
Yeah, and I think it's nothing wrong in taking advice from like friends
oh,
or colleagues
absolutely.
or family and stuff. Always, referrals. You can get all those things. And I'll also advise for some of the younger, kids who want to be entrepreneurs to maybe just have some sort of a mentor or a coach. That helps a lot because you are always thinking from your perspective. Right? If
Correct.
there's somebody who has your interest, who has been in this, thing, has done it before, and is willing to help you. So maybe you can take that person's perspective, so you can get a totally different understanding of it. So that's been helpful. I mean, I have somebody that I work with. He's more of a friend than a true mentor, but I mean, he helps me a lot. I mean, if I have I treat him as like a sounding board, right? If I have some ideas and how to do this and stuff, I talk to him and he says yes or no, or maybe you should try this, or maybe you should talk to this person, or hey, they have done it already and failed or succeeded. So those kind of things, I think it will be very helpful. And also, work with peers. Networking helps a lot. Right?
Yeah.
So at least you get an idea of what's going on. I mean, that's one of the things. Remember earlier I was talking about being in Detroit because there weren't really any product companies in that area, so I could interact with a lot of people.
Yeah.
But had it been in a valley, it would have been totally different. And that's one of the biggest reasons why we moved to Austin for 13 years or so. Is basically said, I need to be with the tech people because that's where everything is happening, and I need to know what's the latest one and get some credibility. Even though we're doing, we have a fabulous product or products, we're not getting the actual vibes just because we are in the wrong place. So sometimes, place matters as well, and obviously luck too. You just sometimes you get
Right
lucky.
time, right place.
Exactly. Yeah. And
No,
there's
I think
nothing to beat that.
I'm on the other side of the spectrum, right? I mean, I agree that there are tons of product companies here. However, we don't have any, domain expertise around here. For instance, we don't have financial sector. We don't have healthcare, automotive. None of them. In other words, actual users of all these technologies are outside, and these people sitting here and imagining in a certain way. And there are a lot of companies are not surviving in Silicon Valley. Just so they get shelved every year. I'm pretty sure there are a bunch of
people
are dying. But
that's part of the constructive destruction process. Yeah, that's
correct. But at the end of the day, hey, they're learning from it, and then they're just going after the next one. And then, so I think that's the nice segue into my next thing is, I always preach. By the way, one more thing before I forget, the one you mentioned is very important. I always preach to all my students in Silicon Valley for you is that you must be a mentor. And you also must have a mentor. So you must be a mentee and mentor simultaneously. I call it continuous learning. So as a result, so if you are not a mentor, you didn't learn. Whatever you learn, when you become a mentor, you're really learning. Because now you can objectify whatever you learn and then put it in the perspective for a certain situation. And if you don't have a mentor, as you said, sometimes you are lost in this whole thing and you don't know if you're on the right track or not. And also you are kind of taking advantage of the wisdom of the other person. And so those are mandatory. And so those point I'm trying to make is that the current system of education, with all due respect, I'm not trying to be negative, do not provide these, unfortunately, for whatever reasons. And then I mean, you can take a bunch of students and say, hey, your role is mentor, and this is your lab work, just like we did a bunch of not useful labs. And, these are more important than like, tinsmith and blacksmithy we did. So, so there is a gap between academics and real world, which is fact. We all know that. And we kind of, so the current education system can be one option. I'm not saying that it's not working at all. That's not what I'm saying. So somebody who's able to take advantage of this, they can use that. There are a lot of people not able to fit into it. And there are some people, they are being under-challenged, right? So for those, the system should provide another option, which is, so anyway, long story short, there's a gap. So what's your take on that? And if what do you recommend an individual to, elevate themselves to figure that out? Because you can't just rely on somebody to, some education system or a college to, rescue you from that.
Yeah, let me say it. I think college is way overrated. So I strongly feel that. It doesn't mean that people doesn't need to go to college, but it works for someone. But you're absolutely right. I think there's a big gap, which always existed, between the industry and academics. And I think it'll continue to exist.
Correct.
It's not that they live in a different world, but there are certain things. I mean, I can sympathize a little bit with the academics because, let me just give you an example, right? So you have like database, like relational databases, right? The theory was all formulated what in like 1940s, 50s, and 60s, right?
I
So we
studied.
learned it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we learned that stuff, and there's still, in colleges, they still teach that stuff. But is it really useful? I mean, if we look at closely, let's say if I'm just a front-end developer, I don't really care about the database. As long as I know that if I write a statement, it works, why do I care about it? It's like, using your abacus or knowing about how the internals of the mathematic tables and things like that. If you have a computer or like a phone, you can get all that stuff. So do you really need it or not? I mean, I don't know, to be honest. But will it help? Maybe in the long run, it might help because now that you understand why there's a database. Somebody says there's NoSQL. Now I understand what's the significance of NoSQL and how different it is from doing the relational database, which is not meant to handle petabytes of data, right? So there's an evolution of that. So you need to understand what the evolution went through and why they had to go from SQL to NoSQL to all kinds of hierarchical relational, all kinds of databases. So things like that, it will be fine. But you're talking more from a practical usage of that stuff, right? It's like science and technology. I mean, you still need to have the basic core science,
Correct.
even if it's physics or chemistry or whatever it is, to get to the next level of technology, because this technology doesn't work if there is no science, right? So there is some sort of thing, but it can be more academic, right? So maybe if you want to get into PhD of the world and just do more research, then it makes a lot more sense to get into that. What I would think is there should be a combination of the two. So
Correct.
I'm all for like internships, so these kids coming out of college or maybe during the college itself, right? Or maybe even high school, right? They can go through, just do some of these internships with companies. They're more than happy to, companies like us, we do all the time, like take interns and then teach them stuff. So two things. One is they get in the technical side, plus they also understand how to work in the industry, how the industry
Correct.
works,
That's
what's the
right.
process that happens in a development company, or how does the customer come in, how do you have to satisfy, so all kinds of things like that. They'll learn from that. So that would be one thing I would say, just to an internship. And nowadays you see a lot of these hackathons and stuff happening at companies or outside out there, so they can just go try it out. And I mean, the fascinating thing I think in the last few years especially is you have all kinds of MOOCs out there, right? The online course that you can go in, anybody can sign up mostly for free and get in whatever it is. I use YouTube way more than anything else.
Yeah.
I would say 80% of all the stuff that my internet usage is basically on YouTube, because for learning stuff. I mean, as I told you, right, when we were talking earlier, that's what I do a lot of my learning nowadays, because learning never stops, right? We think that once you're done with college, okay, now we're done with school.
Yeah.
No, this is when it really, really starts. I spend at least a couple hours a day, learning stuff every day. I mean, metaphorically, but not every day per se. But and most of it is through YouTube, because any technology that you want, any topic that you want, there's so much out there, right?
Correct.
And then it's easy to learn. Previously, you don't need to go to college. I mean, you don't need to go, because if you get into MIT, you get certain kind of thing. But now MIT put all their entire coursework online. Anybody can go in and listen to exactly what the professor told the guys who went to MIT and paid a ton of money on top of everything else. And you can get that, and you can play it in faster speeds, like 1.25 or 1.5, and you can get a lot of things covered. So that learning process, I think, is definitely will be very helpful. So you don't really have to go to college and pick up all that stuff. You get the theory there, but then you can learn from all these kind of things, and then once you go outside, I think it'll be much more valuable. And there are other things you can do, right? So once you learn a language, maybe just build an app.
Yeah.
Like nowadays, it's a mobile app or something like that on your own, and then put it out there. So that gives you confidence, and then we also gives you a skill set. Plus, that is becoming a true entrepreneur, right? And building apps and putting out there and selling it and maintaining it, collecting money. What else is there other than that?
That's it.
That's exactly what entrepreneurship is all about. Just really
100%.
get big, then you hire more people,
That's
make it
right.
better, add more features. So there are a lot of easier ways of doing it. I know earlier you talked about when we were starting our companies, just to get any information, it was crazy, right? I mean, we have to go to like this big yellow books and go through stuff and figure out what it is and who's doing what. So a lot of meeting people, whining and dining, and to get nowadays you don't have to do that. Anybody can do it anywhere in the world,
Yep.
using the internet and web, and and
That-
learn from all kinds of resources that are available, mostly for free.
Yep.
So that's the beauty of it. So there's so much opportunity, for companies like that. And then, kids might work with companies like yours, right? For Silicon Valley for you, or Swat Cloud, Swat Cloud. So they can, get all their skills honed, and then you are offering them like real-time projects, so that they'll have a good idea of exactly how to, execute those projects, and that will, I think, add a lot of value for their future employers.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess, I agree with you that, fundamentals are needed. There's no doubt. You can't just, go to elementary school and start building companies. That doesn't make any sense. So until high school, all the basics, like physics, chemistry, STEM. And then, so at some point, the blend of both is the optimal way of doing it, in my opinion. You learn, you apply. You learn, you apply, so that you know what's working for you. First, that discovery mode. Who are you? I mean, when you get out of college, once everything's said and done, when you get out of school, all kinds of schools, right? Now, who are you? Are you a marketing guy, or a business guy, or a tech guy, or a medicine guy, or XYZ guy? So you probably, that discovery phase or discovery process has not been done. And as a result, many times we start out with something, after 3-4 years, we really, oh, this is not clicking. And then many of, at least the people I know from Bay Area, they all go to, I mean, they used to do MBA, and then boom, they get into some product management, blah, blah. And then what happens, God knows. So, and then you become a rookie, right? You last 5, 7, 8 years, and then you are again starting all over. And yeah, it's crazy. And it's why is it all that happening? Because I think, because you never understood your strengths. You had a no opportunity to understand your strengths. It's not your fault. I'm just saying that the process. So that's why the process we put together is that we take a guy, and then we kind of make them go through all these different opportunities to figure out what really works for them. So, for instance, right, I know I did computer science, in my bachelor's. So college told me that you have to do software job. And the industry said, this is it. If I apply for something else, forget about it. They don't even bother. Because I did computer science, I am allowed to apply for only these 2 jobs, some software related job, end of story. And if I want something else, I don't have formal degree. And as a result, they won't even entertain the thought of even talking to me. So that's kind of, putting in this box, without knowing you. I know you did that degree because why did I do that degree? I wrote an MSET, I got that rank. It's not like, this is what I want. So, and then, by the time you get out of the box, you lost that high energy time. And I guess, so that's the point of what we are trying to push to everybody, is that you start that process early, so that if you discover your path, you have a better chance of succeeding in what you want to do in life, whatever it may be. You can still do a job. You don't have to be an entrepreneur. Whatever you want to do, that doesn't have.
Entrepreneurship is just one path, right? So there's
path.
So many paths to realize what you want to do and make money and be happy and all that stuff. So yeah, fair enough. I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
So so now that we talked about a bunch of other stuff. So do you think, I mean, I don't want to say coding, but I tell everybody that you got to get familiar with tech, no matter what you want to do in life. So what's your take on that? I want to just throw this crypto thing going on. So, anyway, you can take it over.
Hello. Yeah, I mean, fair enough. I mean, obviously, tech is everywhere, right? Sorry about that. Tech is everywhere, right? I mean, you cannot, run away from tech. So and it all depends on what you call tech too. So there's so much technology nowadays. I mean, there's like our regular technology that we know of, like we talked about the crypto side. There's fintech, there's biotech, the whole nine yards. So from that perspective, it is pretty broad. But I mean, technology is omnipresent. It's everywhere. It's only getting bigger and bigger and bigger, right? So one can't shy away from it. I mean, it's a skill, from a coding perspective. Let's say it can be pretty helpful for everybody, right?
Yeah.
May not be, you're not like, be building applications and things like that, but I think you'll get like more into like logical thinking, and then you understand like why things work a certain way, or maybe there's a better way of doing those kind of things. So I don't think one should be, mandated to learn programming just like they do everything else in college and stuff like that. But I don't think it hurts either, right? Because more and more nowadays, it's all technology focused, and a lot of it is driven by the software, honestly. So the thing is, if you learn that, there'll be always an advantage. The second thing is the tech jobs are not going to go away anywhere, right?
Right.
It's only going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. So I mean, you will always be guaranteed with a good job, and working inside, not outside on 100-degree weather like what I'm experiencing right now. I know how hard it is to work there because I did a couple of times. I was like, no, it's not something that we could do. So there'll always be opportunities on the technology side, and that's where you want to be, right? Because that's going to be the future. I mean, that's where you want to learn things that will be useful for you in the future, and then there's no better way than doing in technology. I mean, when I say technology, not just pure programming per se,
Right.
just in the pure,
Overall.
science and STEM and those kind of things.
Yeah.
I mean, coding mandatory? Maybe not. I don't have a big opinion on that.
Sure.
But it's definitely not going to hurt you, and it's going to help you a lot. Is what I would think.
Absolutely. So I think one other thing I like to add to what you said is tech is global. One day you want to just decide to go to New Zealand, just go take the laptop and you can work there.
Absolutely.
And other thing is, I mean, you are right that I'm not going to sit here and say everybody must code. But for instance, crypto right now, right? The whole hoopla going on. There are certain people right now, their mindsets are typically, AI or, all these blockchain, all technical stuff. I don't know. I mean, I'm not a techie guy. I'm not tech savvy. And then they just don't even try. That's the risk you're taking if you're not involved from the get-go.
Yeah.
At least, tomorrow there will be blah, blah. God knows right now, metaverse, right? So there is always going to be blah, blah. At least.
Yeah, I mean, just since you're talking about, go ahead. Sorry, finish it.
No, you have a window. Okay, now I know how to get in and read and make sense of what they are talking about, so that maybe that they can utilize that or that particular skill or domain into what they are trying to do, so that they can sort of accelerate their career, whatever that may be.
Yeah. I mean, just since you're mentioning cryptos, that's a great example, right? People think crypto is just technology. It's not really. I mean, if you look at Bitcoin and stuff, Bitcoin is basically digital money. So you can call that more like on the finance side of things rather than just pure technology. Technology is a small piece of that stuff.
Correct.
It just gives you the decentralization and the security and immutability and things like that. But there's so much can be done because nowadays, if you look at it, everything has to be mediated through a bank, right? So you want to send a wire transfer, you want to make a payment, whatever, credit card, everything has to be mediated through that. So with Bitcoin, so this is globalized. So you can send money from anywhere to anywhere without having an intermediary in the beginning. So from a conceptual perspective, that is great. I mean, that's what total decentralization means. Sure, I mean, but the crypto portion is only a small piece of that stuff, right? Just because Bitcoin was the first one and then started off using the crypto stuff, people think that's all crypto. But look at all the blockchain stuff. I mean, that's where I think the real value of that is in the blockchain technology.
A lot of people missing out. I mean, they're missing out on that.
Yeah. I mean, and it's going to come. I mean, obviously, because of the crypto winter or whatever they're calling now, it's going to take a little bit of backseat. But sure, in the long run, it's going to come back. There's so many things that blockchain can do in a fabulous manner. Mostly on the decentralization or even like self-sovereign identity. It's great because, like 2 billion people don't even have any ID card today. They don't have anything, no driver's license, no ID card, nothing. And they can't get any services, no banking services, nothing at all. So what if you can come up with some sort of a self-sovereign identity, which there are some companies, doing that right now. So there's so many opportunities on that. So it's not just purely about technology, it's how it's going to impact the whole world.
That's correct.
So that's the beauty of that stuff, right? So it's nice to focus on this, but at the end of the day, if it doesn't impact the world, again, like I said, you can build the greatest software, the greatest blockchain out there. If nobody's using it, not going to advance humanity, what's the point, right?
Not only point, nobody's going to use it, and your skill is obsolete. So I agree with you. You are able to articulate so well because you are in it, right? You talk to a guy who is not in tech today. If you say crypto, the moment, I mean, probably,
Yeah.
although he's supposed to be perceiving that as a financial thing, he says, oh, it's all techie stuff. These things happen in Silicon Valley. I don't want to deal with it. So
because all they have to do is, I mean, if we are a little technical, all you got to do is read that, the Bitcoin white paper, right? That's it. That'll give you everything.
Right.
And it's not big too. And I would know 95% of tech people don't even read that stuff. So
exactly. For those who are not in it, right, they don't have that inclination or aptitude even to get there, right? So in other words, they have this mental block that this is foreign to me. I'm not cut out for that. So that is the one we don't, I mean, the future generation can't get into. Our generation people, we are okay. A lot of people didn't deal with tech. They are doing fine. But in future, at least I think it's going to be very risky if you're completely, off.
Yeah, I would rather be like a generalist, going across multiple things rather than just be too focused on, one or two things. Okay. At least that's what I like, because I have like varied interests, ranging from tech to, philosophy to all kinds of stuff, right? Biotech and finance, the whole 9 yards. Because that gives me a lot of ability to just put those things together, pull them up, and say how we can incorporate these things together, and then come up with a nice application or a nice product that would be useful for the customer. So that's what I believe in. Because some people just say, okay, you need to go deeper into one thing, and that's what you focus on. But I mean, that's not my forte. I would rather be a generalist.
Same here. I mean, I'm even some of my my employees, they say I'm a big picture guy. Anyway, that's nice segue into the next question. So talk about your products at Tecra and your service that you're providing, the customer base you're targeting.
Yeah, sure. So basically, on a day-to-day basis, I run a couple of companies. One is called Tecra Systems. So we offer a couple of platforms under Tecra. It's called Aki Connect. Aki Connect is basically a marketing technology platform that handles like cross-media, omni-channel marketing, so like campaign management, and we're pretty strong in the print fulfillment area, and also the digital side of things. So we do everything from print, email, text messages, WhatsApps, everything put together as part of the campaign, like marketing campaigns and stuff. Then you primarily work with some of the print OEMs, like Xerox and say Canon and so forth, and also a lot of big printers like Donnelly, Excella, Senveo, Office Depot, and all, and some in the automotive space as well as in franchises. So that's what the Aki Connect platform is. So it's offered as a SaaS model. And this other one, the next one we built in the last couple of years, is called AccuLink, which is essentially variable data connectors to e-commerce platforms such as Shopify, BigCommerce, Salesforce, Marketing Cloud, and Magento, and all those. So that's the Tecra. So surrounding that, we also not only offer the platform, but we do the integrations and enhancements or whatever the customizations that are needed for some of the enterprise customers. The second company we have, it's also an offshoot, a spun off from Tecra a few years back. It's called QuickComms. It's in the customer communications management space. They call it the CCM, space. So we primarily work in the healthcare. I mean, like the regulated industries, like healthcare, insurance, finance, utilities, and all that. So I think I'm sure you have the medical insurance where you get like every year, you get a big welcome kit with all the information and your plan that you have, your deductibles and your providers or that. So they use our software to do that, like the Blue Cross Blue Shield of the world, and a lot of other healthcare companies use it. The same thing with the insurance industry and banking and finance and utilities as well. So that's those are the two main things that I work. I mean, I do have another company in Michigan, which is in the document management space called MyTech Solutions. So it's mostly like a technology-based BPO kind of service. So we work with obviously automotive space there, like both the GM and Ford or several others, where we digitize all the engineering drawings, and we have over 16,000 Ford engineers using it all across the world actually for all the parts for every car made since like whatever 1960, 70 onwards. So we do that. And then I have a few other entities that I have people, that I'm involved with that I don't run them, but I have people work with. One is in the blockchain space. So that's how I did a lot of research on the blockchain and, all those things. So that's the other one that I have, which is called Authentis. And lastly, we actually worked on a gig economy product, basically, which puts together the multifamily housing renters and the cleaning people together with an access app and things like that. So that's what I'm involved with. So obviously, you can say I'm a little entrepreneurial and just make some investments in some other startups and stuff, and we help them with the technology and any advice, and sometimes even coming up with some funding for that as well. So that's what I do.
Fantastic. Yeah, I mean, so I call it portfolio of products. It's not just one. I mean, portfolio of companies.
Keep trying. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the best way to do it.
I mean, it's like I said, right? It's all about just being an entrepreneur. If you just do something and find a nice niche there, and there's a nice space for a product that can solve a lot of problems. We try to get into that. I mean, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. I mean, obviously, there are a couple of other companies that we started and shut them down because it didn't work out for whatever reason. Most of the time, it's like like maybe the wrong product or wrong technology, or whatever. But that's what you do. That's what you learn. I mean, you can't win them all, but as long as you can win 60%, you're good.
If you don't try, you can't do it. Right? You have to try
exactly.
something. You got to.
Absolutely.
So
absolutely. And that's part of the entrepreneurial process, right? I mean, you can't win them all. Some people might be lucky to do that, but it's very difficult.
I think that applies everywhere, not only entrepreneurship, right? Where anything, right? Even if you join a company, not every company is going to work out for you. You're going to quit those companies. That's why you quit, right? And you go somewhere else. It's not working out for you, or it's they don't like you in some cases, right?
Sure.
It happens. So in either case, yeah. I mean I think that's what I typically, this is the best way to put it, right? You talked about relation database and SQL and NoSQL. I have an analogy for you. So education institutions are structured. It's like a relation data. There is a schema.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
When you come to the world, there is no structure. This is unstructured world. This is like NoSQL. So
that's a good one. I should start using it.
This is true, right? Once you join a company, there is no curriculum, there is no book, there is no index. They say, hey, you start here. There is no semester here. So
and then it changes from company to company as well. So it's even more.
And many times they say, hey, here is the thing, go and work there. I mean, the guy, you go there with the book and stand there. Where do you start? So so I guess I mean, that's, you make something out of nothing, is that typically they say, right? That's I would say, that's the kind of stuff you have to deal with. That's where you need those intangible skills. We call it connecting dots or communicating, understanding the customer, yada yada, all those. I don't think you can read or learn. You have to learn by doing it. So sooner you start, better it is for anybody. So
that's true.
With that, it's a great conversation, Giri. So hopefully we'll do another one soon, and maybe we take one of your portfolio of companies. We can maybe dig deep and whatever. We'll figure out.
I just have a few, man. Don't think that I have a ton of companies and all successful.
Few is spelled as QON. I mean,
okay. Is it?
Sounds good. Yeah, this is. I sincerely hope people, especially the youth that are in colleges and just trying to just getting out of colleges, they can take advantage of some of their tips, and so hopefully, we can put together another podcast that's a little bit more focused on certain aspect of this. Thanks again. I really appreciate taking time and to join me for this podcast.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. Appreciate it. It was a fun conversation because normally we don't get to talk for so long,
I know.
over the phone and stuff. So
Yeah, and then
it's
suddenly you
nice.
get another call, right? Or we get another call.
Exactly.
You
Yeah,
had that
yeah.
conversation.
So this is good. So hopefully, people take something out of it, and see where it goes.
Yep. And one more thing is extremely
No, sure.
constructive conversation, right? So